Grandma, did you like the birthday surprise? My granddaughter asked with a smile so bright it almost fooled me. I looked up from my plate, confused, still holding the silver cake fork I'd used at every family birthday for nearly 40 years. What surprise, sweetheart? Her smile changed. It sharpened. Then, in front of my children, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, neighbors, church friends, and every person I had loved enough to feed, babysit, support, and forgive. She slapped me. The sound cracked through the dining room louder than the champagne glasses. You should have died years ago, old woman, she said. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end, and comment where you're watching from, because what happened at my 70th birthday party shattered everything I thought I knew about family. For 70 years, I believed birthdays were meant to remind us that we were loved. That morning, I'd woken up with that belief still intact. Sunlight spilled through my kitchen curtains in Columbus, Ohio, catching the gold trim on the china I'd inherited from my mother. I'd been up since 6 a.m., frosting my own cake because Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, had insisted she was too overwhelmed, organizing the party I was supposedly too old to plan myself. So I did what I had always done. I handled it. I arranged flowers. Set out my late husband Walter's favorite crystal punch bowl. Polished silverware until my arthritic fingers ached. I even wore the lavender dress he used to say made me look like spring refusing to quit. 70. A number I once feared then earned. I had buried a husband. Raised a son. Helped pay for my granddaughter Chloe's private school tuition when my son's construction business nearly collapsed in 2014. I had sold my own jewelry to keep this family afloat more than once. And that day, as balloons swayed gently above the dining room table and the roast warmed in the oven, I truly believed I was being celebrated. By 4 p.m., the house was full. Laughter. Perfume. Expensive shoes on hardwood floors. Chloe arrived wearing a designer dress I'd partially paid for last Christmas. She barely hugged me. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said. Distracted, already texting. I noticed things then, little things. Jennifer whispering too often. My son, Daniel, avoiding eye contact. Several guests smirking when I mentioned how grateful I was to have everyone together. Still, I ignored it. Because mothers do that. Grandmothers do that. We silence our instincts just to keep the peace. Then came the cake. 7 candles for 70. To make it cute, Chloe said. Everyone gathered around. Phones came out. And Chloe lifted her champagne glass, tapping it lightly for attention. I just want to thank Grandma, she began, her voice dripping with something I was too trusting to recognize. The room went quiet. I smiled. I had no idea. I was smiling seconds before my entire life changed. I kept smiling. That's the strange thing about shock. Sometimes, when your heart doesn't yet understand what's happening, your face keeps pretending everything is normal. Chloe stood there beneath the gold "Happy 70th birthday" banner I had hung myself the night before, her champagne glass raised, her blonde curls perfectly styled, looking so much like the little girl I used to rock to sleep after thunderstorms that for one foolish second, I thought maybe she was about to say something sweet. Maybe she was going to thank me for the summer I spent teaching her to read. Or for the braces I quietly paid for when Daniel's insurance fell short. Or maybe for the used Honda Civic I helped buy when she got into Ohio State. Instead, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not playful. A sharp, polished laugh that sounded practiced. I just want to thank Grandma, she said, glancing around the room like she was waiting for applause, for proving that modern medicine really can keep people alive way longer than necessary. A few people gasped. A few laughed. Laughed. I remember that more than anything. Not just her words. The laughter. Jennifer covered her mouth, but I could still see her smile. Daniel looked down into his bourbon. My own son. The boy I had once held through ear infections, heartbreak, and his father's funeral, couldn't even look at me. I felt something cold move through me then. Not tears. Something heavier. The kind of pain that doesn't explode. It freezes. Oh, come on, Chloe said when the silence stretched too long. We're all thinking it. She's like, what? 100? Living off Grandpa's money, acting like this house is hers. The room blurred around the edges. Walter's house. My house. The mortgage we had paid together over 32 years. I gripped the edge of the dining table so hard my knuckles turned white. Chloe, I said softly, because somehow I still believed there had to be a line she wouldn't cross. She rolled her eyes. Then she stepped closer. And that was when her hand struck my face. Hard. You should have died years ago, old woman. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind so deep you could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. Tick. 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 My cheek burned. But somehow, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was looking at Daniel, waiting for him to finally stand up. To say, "That's enough." To protect me. He exhaled slowly, like I was the one making things difficult. "Mom," he muttered barely above a whisper. "Maybe don't make this bigger than it already is." I don't remember deciding to put down my fork. I don't remember reaching for my purse. But I remember this, I did not cry. Not there. Not in front of them. I simply nodded once, the way women of my generation do when our hearts are breaking but our dignity refuses to. Then I walked out of my own birthday party, past the cake, past the candles, past the family I had spent 70 years loving. And for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if Walter had tried to warn me before he died. The drive home should have taken 12 minutes. I know because I had driven that same route from my house in Worthington to Daniel's place in Dublin, Ohio, every Sunday for nearly 8 years. 12 minutes? That night, it took me 43. Not because of traffic. Because I had to pull over twice. The first time was 3 blocks from their subdivision, when I realized my hands were shaking too badly to keep the Buick straight. The second was in the parking lot of St. Andrew's Church, because that was where Walter and I used to sit whenever life hit harder than we expected. I parked beneath the same maple tree whose leaves he once said looked like little hands waving in October. And for the first time since Walter's funeral 3 years ago, I let myself ask the question I had avoided. Had my husband known? The thought came quietly. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a slow, unwelcome crack in the foundation of everything I believed. Walter had always adored Chloe. From the day she was born, he called her his little June bug. He built her dollhouse by hand. Opened savings bonds in her name every birthday. Took her fishing at Alum Creek every summer until his arthritis got too bad. But during his final year, something changed. I remembered little things. How he'd grown strangely quiet whenever Jennifer spoke about the future. How he insisted on handling certain paperwork alone, even after his cancer treatments left him exhausted. How, 2 weeks before he passed, he had sat beside me in this very car after chemo and said, "Evelyn, promise me you'll read everything. Don't just trust blood because it shares your name." At the time, I thought grief medication was making him philosophical. Now, sitting in that church parking lot with my cheek still stinging from Chloe's hand, I wondered if it had been a warning. When I finally got home, the silence inside my colonial felt different. Not lonely. Revealing. The "Happy Birthday, Mom!" floral arrangement Daniel had sent that morning sat on the kitchen counter like a cruel prop from a play I no longer understood. I took off my heels. Set down my purse. Then I saw it. Walter's old leather briefcase. Top shelf of the hall closet. Exactly where he had always kept his important things. For 3 years I hadn't touched it. Grief can do that. Turn ordinary objects into sacred ground. But that night, something pulled me toward it. Maybe instinct. Maybe survival. My fingers trembled as I carried it to the dining room table, the same table where I had just been humiliated hours earlier. The brass clasps were stiff. Inside were folders. Insurance papers. Tax returns. Property records. And beneath them all, A sealed white envelope. My name, written in Walter's steady handwriting. Evelyn. For when you finally see them clearly. I stopped breathing. Outside, the porch light flickered. Inside, 70 years of trust began to shift. And with trembling hands, I opened it. Walter's handwriting had always been neat. Even after chemotherapy. Even after the tremors started. That was the first thing I noticed as I unfolded the letter. His careful block print, dark blue ink, every word spaced like he knew I might one day read it through tears. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then something has happened that finally made you question the people we spent our lives loving. I had to stop. Not because I didn't want to keep going. Because I suddenly couldn't feel my hands. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily behind me, and for a moment, all I could hear was Walter's voice. Low. Steady. Certain. I sat down slowly in my dining room chair, the same chair where he used to read the Sunday paper, and forced myself to continue. I pray I'm wrong. I pray Daniel remembers who he is. But I've watched Jennifer too carefully not to prepare for the possibility that kindness may be mistaken for weakness after I'm gone. A chill ran through me. Not fear. Recognition. Walter had seen something. Something I had refused to. There were pages behind the letter, bank statements, copies of property documents, legal notes in Walter's handwriting. Dates circled. Names underlined. One entry caught my eye immediately. March 14, 2024. Jennifer requested Daniel ask about transferring house deed into family trust. I frowned. March 14th. That was only 6 weeks after Walter's diagnosis became terminal. I kept reading. If Daniel pressures you to move, sell, or surrender control of this house, do not agree until you speak to Martin Keller. Martin. Walter's attorney. A man I hadn't spoken to since the estate was settled. My pulse quickened. Beneath that was something else. A photocopy of a trust amendment. I stared at the legal language, reading slower this time. Upon my death, the marital residence remains solely under Evelyn Carter's control unless she voluntarily relinquishes ownership. Any evidence of coercion, elder neglect, or abuse by direct descendants may trigger immediate forfeiture of inheritance. Rights. Forfeiture. I read that word 3 times. Then a fourth. My son could lose everything. Not because Walter stopped loving him. Because Walter saw what greed could become. Tears finally came then. Not loud. Not broken. Just silent, exhausted tears for the man who had tried to protect me, even after death. And then I found the final note, paper-clipped to the back. Evelyn, if Chloe ever speaks to you with cruelty, understand this: children do not invent contempt. They inherit it. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Children do not invent contempt. They inherit it. Suddenly, Chloe's slap felt less like a single act, and more like evidence. Evidence of years. Years of poison I had smiled through. Years of whispers I ignored. Years of being slowly repositioned from mother to burden. At 11:47 p.m., I picked up my phone. My fingers were steadier now. I dialed Martin Keller's number from Walter's old Rolodex. Voicemail. So I left one message. Martin, this is Evelyn Carter. I think my husband knew something before he died. I looked around my quiet house. At the family photos. At the birthday flowers. At the untouched slice of cake I had brought home. Then I said the words I never imagined I'd need to say. And I think tonight, I finally know why. Martin Keller called me back at 7:12 the next morning. I remember because I hadn't slept. Not really. I had spent the night at my kitchen table in Walter's old navy robe, reading and rereading his letter until dawn stretched pale gold across the backyard he'd once mowed every Saturday without fail. The phone rang just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Evelyn, Martin said, his voice older than I remembered, but sharp. I got your message. For one dangerous second, I nearly downplayed everything. That old instinct. The one women my age were raised on. Don't cause trouble. Don't embarrass the family. Don't make things worse. But then I touched my cheek. Still tender. And I told him the truth. All of it. The birthday dinner. Chloe's words. The slap. Daniel's silence. When I finished, Martin didn't speak right away. And somehow, that silence said more than pity ever could. Walter was afraid of this, he said finally. I closed my eyes. Afraid. Not suspicious. Not concerned. Afraid. He came to me 9 months before he passed. Martin continued. He said Jennifer had begun asking unusual questions about deed structures, probate timelines, power of attorney. At first, he thought she was just planning ahead. But then Daniel started asking too. I gripped the counter. Not Daniel. Not my boy. But somewhere deep down, I already knew. Walter legally protected you, Martin said. Not just the house. Several accounts too. Several accounts? I sat down slowly. Evelyn, did Daniel ever mention your legacy preservation fund? My breath caught. What fund? Silence. Paper shuffling. Then Martin's voice changed. Not softer. Worse. Confused. Walter allocated $450,000 into a controlled trust 6 months before his death. It was designated for your health care, living expenses, and personal independence. Monthly distributions were supposed to begin immediately after probate closed. The kitchen seemed to tilt. No, I whispered. That's not possible. Because if that were true, then why had I been rationing my blood pressure medication? Why had I postponed fixing the furnace last winter? Why had I dipped into my Social Security just to replace the roof shingles after the spring storm? Martin, I said carefully, each word colder now. I never received a dime. Nothing. Not one payment. I heard him inhale sharply. That account has been active for almost 3 years. 3 years. 36 months. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Who controls it? I asked. More papers. Then, Daniel was assigned co-trust oversight for administrative convenience. Administrative convenience. There are phrases so polished they almost hide the knife. Almost. But all withdrawals require justification. Martin added. Healthcare. Housing. Essential support. I stared out my kitchen window at Walter's rose garden. Deadheading season had come and gone. The roses were overgrown. Neglected. Like me. Send me everything, I said. Every statement. Every withdrawal. Martin hesitated only once. Then quietly asked, Evelyn, are you prepared for what you may find? I thought about Chloe's hand, Jennifer's smile, Daniel's lowered eyes, Walter's warning. Children do not invent contempt. They inherit it. I straightened in my chair, my voice steadier than it had been in years. No, I said honestly. Then I looked at Walter's empty seat across from me. But I'm done being unprepared. By noon, Martin's email arrived. 27 pages. And on page 3, I saw my son's name, attached to a $38,000 withdrawal. Purpose listed. Chloe Carter, private academy tuition/educational advancement. I kept scrolling. Luxury SUV lease. Kitchen renovation. Bahamas family cruise. All categorized under dependent family support. My money. Walter's protection. My sacrifice. And suddenly, my 70th birthday slap no longer felt like the beginning. It felt like the moment I finally stopped ignoring the theft. I wish I could tell you I cried. That I gasped. That I threw my coffee mug across Walter's kitchen the way younger women do in movies when betrayal finally becomes undeniable. But I didn't. At 70, heartbreak doesn't always arrive like fire. Sometimes, it arrives like arithmetic. Line by line. Withdrawal by withdrawal. Receipt by receipt. I sat at my kitchen table with Martin's documents spread around me like evidence from a life I hadn't realized was being dismantled while I was still living it. $4,200. Home accessibility upgrades. I looked around my house. My front steps were still cracked. My upstairs bathtub still had the loose porcelain handle Walter used to jiggle every winter. No upgrades. $11,600. Primary caregiver transportation. I laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because for 3 years, I had been driving myself to cardiology appointments in a Buick with failing air conditioning. The laughter came out thin. Sharp. Almost unrecognizable. And then, $62,000. Stamped over 14 months. Description: residential transition planning. I froze. Transition. A word too vague to sound dangerous. Until I remembered Jennifer's favorite phrase every Thanksgiving. We just worry about you in that big house, Evelyn. Not Mom. Not Evelyn Carter. Just Evelyn. Like I was already becoming separate from the family. Like a problem to manage. My stomach turned. I grabbed my phone and searched one address listed beside multiple trust disbursements. Silver Pines Senior Living Consultants. I stared at the screen. Then clicked. A smiling older woman appeared on the homepage, standing in front of a beige retirement complex beneath cheerful blue letters, helping families make the right transition. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it. I called the number. A receptionist answered warmly. Silver Pines, this is Andrea. My voice almost failed me. Hello? I'm calling to ask whether my family has recently inquired about placement options for Evelyn Carter. Typing. A pause. Then, oh yes, Mrs. Carter. We've spoken several times with your daughter-in-law Jennifer. She mentioned you were resistant, but that cognitive decline was becoming a concern. Cognitive decline. I stopped breathing. There must be some mistake, I whispered. Another pause. Then Andrea's professional tone shifted. Would you like me to email you the intake packet your family requested? Requested. Not suggested. Not discussed. Requested. I gave her my email. Then sat perfectly still until the message arrived. Attached were forms. Medical release authorizations. Financial planning estimates. Property liquidation consultation. And there, under family goals, Jennifer's typed note. Needs smooth transition after birthday. She's emotionally attached to house but increasingly confused. Granddaughter willing to help encourage move. After birthday. My birthday. The party. The public humiliation. Chloe's cruelty. It wasn't random. It was strategy. Pressure. Embarrass me. Destabilize me. Make me look fragile. I thought back to the slap. To Daniel's silence. To the guests watching. And suddenly, the entire evening rearranged itself in my mind, not as family dysfunction, but as a test. A performance. To see whether I would break. Whether I would surrender. Whether I would start doubting myself enough to hand over my freedom. I printed every document. All 34 pages. Then I walked upstairs to Walter's study, the one room Jennifer always said felt outdated. Inside his old gunmetal filing cabinet was exactly what I prayed still existed. Original. Signatures. Property rights. Medical evaluations. My clean neurological exam from 6 months ago. No dementia. No decline. No confusion. Just betrayal. By sunset, I had 3 folders. Walter's protections. Financial theft. Premeditated institutionalization. I placed them side by side on the desk. For years, I had mistaken Jennifer's polished concern for love. Mistaken Daniel's distance for stress. Mistaken Chloe's cruelty for youth. Not anymore. At 6:40 p.m., I called Martin again. I don't want damage control, I said. My voice was calm now. Too calm. I want everything locked down. He was silent for half a second. Then, Evelyn, What exactly are you planning? I looked out Walter's study window at the setting sun over the backyard we built together. And for the first time since my granddaughter's hand touched my face, I smiled. The same thing they were planning for me, I said. A transition. Martin moved faster than I expected. Maybe because Walter had once been his closest friend. Maybe because men like Martin, careful, polished, expensive men, recognized evil best when it came wrapped in paperwork. By 9 a.m. the next morning, every liquid asset connected to my trust required dual attorney verification. By noon, new medical directives had been filed. By 3 p.m., Daniel and Jennifer no longer had administrative visibility into a single protected account. Quietly. Legally. Completely. I didn't tell them. Not yet. Because for 70 years, I had learned something women like Jennifer never truly understand. Silence can be a weapon, if you stop using it to protect the wrong people. That Thursday, Jennifer called. I watched her name light up my phone while I sat in Walter's leather chair, reviewing trust amendments with my reading glasses low on my nose. Jennifer. For years, I would have answered on the first ring. Not anymore. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice arrived sugar-coated. Hi, Evelyn. Just checking in after everything. Chloe feels terrible. You know teenagers can be emotional. We were thinking maybe brunch on Sunday? Just immediate family. A reset. A reset. I nearly admired it. No apology. No accountability. Just repositioning. Like my humiliation had been an unfortunate misunderstanding instead of a calculated move. 5 minutes later, Daniel texted. Mom, let's not overreact. Chloe's been under pressure. College, social stuff. You know how kids are. I stared at that message for a long time. You know how kids are. No, Daniel. I know how children are taught. And I was beginning to understand exactly what Chloe had been taught. So I said nothing. Instead, I drove to First Commonwealth Bank downtown, the same branch Walter used for 40 years. Sandra Whitmore still worked there. Silver bob haircut. Pearl earrings. Sharp as ever. She recognized me instantly. Mrs. Carter, she said softly, and something in her face told me Martin had already called ahead. Inside her office, behind frosted glass and polite smiles, I spent 2 hours doing something I should have done the day Walter died. I reclaimed authority. Signature updates. Beneficiary revisions. Access revocations. New private authentication. By the time I finished, Daniel's emergency authorization was gone. Jennifer's indirect permissions were erased. And Chloe. I removed the education disbursement rider entirely. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. Walter had funded Chloe's future believing love would guide her. But love without character is just expensive denial. When I walked out of that bank, the autumn air felt different. Cooler. Cleaner. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's safety net. I was someone with leverage. That evening, Andrea from Silver Pines called again. Mrs. Carter. I thought you should know your daughter-in-law requested a priority placement tour for Monday. Monday. 4 days away. I smiled so slowly it almost surprised me. Wonderful, I said. Andrea hesitated. I'm sorry? Yes, I replied, my voice calm enough to make my own pulse seem louder. Please keep the appointment. Silence. Then cautious curiosity. You still wish to tour? Oh, absolutely. Because suddenly I did. Not to surrender. To gather. To listen. To document. To understand exactly how far they'd already gone. That night, I opened my hall closet and pulled out the navy blue suit I had worn to Walter's funeral. Structured shoulders. Simple pearls. The uniform of a woman people underestimated at their own expense. Then I called Chloe. She answered on the third ring, sounding bored. Yeah? Not Grandma. Not hello. Just yeah. I smiled anyway. Sweetheart, I said warmly. I've been thinking. A pause. About what? About your idea. Her silence sharpened. And for the first time since my birthday, I heard uncertainty. I think, I said gently, you may be right. Now she sounded interested. Right about what? That it's time for a transition. By the time we hung up, Chloe sounded almost excited. And somewhere in Daniel's house, I imagined Jennifer was smiling. They thought I was folding. Finally accepting reality. Finally becoming manageable. What they didn't know was that Monday morning, I wasn't walking into Silver Pines as their confused burden. I was walking in as the legal owner of everything they had tried to steal. And I intended to find out exactly which lies they'd signed their names to. Monday arrived cold and bright. The kind of Ohio morning Walter used to call honest weather. No storms. No excuses. Just sharp air, bare trees, and the truth waiting whether you were ready or not. I dressed carefully. Navy suit. Pearls. Low heels. Not because Silver Pines deserved my best, but because I did. Jennifer pulled into my driveway at exactly 9 a.m. in the white Lexus my trust had partially paid for. I watched from the front window as she stepped out wearing cream wool, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of a woman already rehearsing sympathy. When I opened the door, her smile was almost convincing. Evelyn, she said softly, reaching for my arm like we were grieving together instead of standing in the aftermath of her paperwork conspiracy. I'm so relieved you're being reasonable. Reasonable. Such a polished word for surrender. I smiled back. I've had time to think. And that, at least, was true. During the drive, Chloe sat in the back seat scrolling her phone. No apology. No mention of my birthday. Just one brief glance at me in the rearview mirror. You'll probably like it, she said. Silver Pines has yoga. Yoga. I almost laughed. As though lavender stretching classes could replace the home. Walter built by hand. As though independence could be softened with brochure language. Daniel met us there. Of course he did. Standing near the entrance in a camel coat, holding coffee for Jennifer but not one for me. My son looked nervous. Not guilty. Nervous. Like a man waiting for paperwork, not forgiveness. Silver Pines was immaculate. Cream walls. Soft piano music. Lemon polish. Framed paintings of birds in flight. Everything designed to feel peaceful enough that no one asked harder questions. Andrea greeted us warmly, though I caught the flicker of surprise in her eyes when she realized I was alert, composed, watching everything. Mrs. Carter, she said carefully, we're so happy to help make this transition comfortable. I nodded. Then let Jennifer do what women like Jennifer always do when they think power is already theirs. She performed. Oh, Evelyn's been struggling more since Walter passed. She sighed to staff. Memory issues. Isolation. We just want her safe. Memory issues. There it was again. The lie. Repeated enough times to sound administrative. I lowered my gaze slightly. Not in shame. In patience. Because Martin had been right. People reveal everything when they believe you're too weak to challenge them. They showed me garden patios. Dining halls. Medication management. Then came the financial office. My favorite part. A pleasant administrator named Susan slid a folder across the polished desk. Your family has already pre-selected our Willow Care Legacy package. Legacy. Another beautiful word dressed over theft. I opened the packet slowly. Private suite. Asset coordination consultation. Home liquidation referral. Projected entry timeline, within 30 days. My eyes moved lower. Primary family representative, Jennifer Carter. Secondary, Daniel Carter. Authorized emotional support facilitator, Chloe Carter. And then, estimated property transition asset, $1.8 million. My house. My land. Walter's workshop. Everything. Already categorized like a pending transfer. Susan smiled kindly. Your daughter-in-law has been wonderfully proactive. I looked at Jennifer. Really looked at her. At the polished nails. The careful posture. The tiny flicker of victories she hadn't quite hidden. This wasn't panic planning. This was strategy with a manicure. I placed the folder down gently. Then I asked the question that changed the room. Before we continue, could you please provide copies of every document my family submitted about my mental competency? Silence. Not awkward. Dangerous. Daniel blinked. Jennifer's smile cracked. Chloe finally looked up from her phone. And Susan, poor Susan, suddenly understood she was no longer guiding a fragile widow. She was sitting across from the woman whose signature controlled the estate everyone else had already started dividing. Jennifer laughed too quickly. Oh, Evelyn, don't be dramatic. No, I said. Just that. No. My voice wasn't loud. But it landed harder than Chloe's hand ever had. For the record, I continued, removing my neurologist's evaluation from my handbag and placing it on Susan's desk. My cognition is excellent. Then I turned one page further in their intake file and saw the forged sentence. Patient increasingly paranoid and financially irresponsible. Signed, Jennifer Carter. The room didn't explode. That would have been easier. No, it tightened. Like every person inside that polished office had suddenly realized the script had changed, but no one knew their new lines. Susan's professional smile disappeared first. Her eyes dropped to the neurologist's report in front of her. Date 6 months ago. Cognitive status, excellent. Independent function, fully capable. Financial judgment, sound. Then she looked back at Jennifer. Not warmly. Not politely. Carefully. I'm sorry, Susan said, her voice shifting into the kind professionals use when liability enters the room. Mrs. Carter, can you clarify this discrepancy? Jennifer blinked. Just once. But I saw it. That tiny fracture between performance and panic. Oh, this? She said, laughing too lightly. Evelyn has good days and bad days. We were just being cautious. Cautious. Daniel finally stepped in, as predictable as gravity. Mom, nobody's attacking you, he said, lowering his voice the way people do when they're trying to sound calm for witnesses. We're just planning ahead. Planning ahead. I turned slowly and looked at my son. Really looked. At the silver beginning in his hair. At the expensive watch on his wrist. At the same blue eyes Walter once had, now clouded by cowardice. Did planning ahead include stealing from my healthcare trust? I asked. Silence. Not one person moved. Chloe's phone lowered completely now. Daniel's face lost color. Jennifer straightened too quickly. Excuse me? I opened my leather folder, removed Martin's printed statements, and placed them, one by one, on Susan's desk. Bahamas cruise. Luxury vehicle lease. Kitchen renovation. Silver Pines deposit consultation. All paid through protected allocations intended for Evelyn Carter. My money. Susan didn't even try to hide her alarm now. Oh my! Daniel's voice sharpened. Mom, you don't understand how those accounts were structured. No, I said. Again. That one word was becoming my favorite. I understand perfectly now. Jennifer's mask finally slipped. Are you seriously doing this here? She hissed. There she was. Not the concerned daughter-in-law. Not the organized caregiver. Just a woman furious her target had read the paperwork. I folded my hands calmly. Actually, Jennifer, you started this here. Susan quietly excused herself. Not to give us privacy. To get legal. I knew because I had once served on enough hospital boards with Walter to recognize institutional fear. Chloe looked between her parents for the first time like a child noticing smoke. Wait, she said slowly. What does stealing mean? No one answered her. So I did. It means, I said, turning to face my granddaughter fully, that the college tuition I thought Grandpa left to help you succeed was partially used to manipulate me. Her face changed. Not into remorse. Into confusion. Real confusion. Because for the first time, Chloe wasn't hearing Jennifer's version. She was hearing mine. Your parents told Silver Pines I was mentally declining, I said gently. They told professionals I was paranoid. Irresponsible. Unable to manage my own life. Grandma, Chloe whispered. And there it was. Not old woman. Not attitude. Grandma. Jennifer snapped immediately. Don't twist this. But it was too late. Susan returned, with the facility director. And behind them, a legal compliance officer. 3 people. 3 folders. 3 expressions that all said the same thing. This had gone far beyond family tension. Mrs. Carter, the director said carefully, given these documents, we are pausing all intake activity immediately. Paused. Such a beautiful corporate word for collapse. Daniel stepped toward me then, his voice lower. Mom, please. Let's go home and talk. Home. Interesting. Because suddenly, when the estate was at risk, my home was mine again. I stood. Smoothed my jacket. Picked up my purse. And for the first time in years, every person in that room moved around me, not over me. No, I said quietly. Then I looked directly at Jennifer. You wanted a transition. I let the word settle. So here it is. By the time I walked out of Silver Pines that morning, their plan to remove me had become documented evidence. And for the first time since Walter died, I wasn't the family burden. I was the family liability. By Tuesday morning, Columbus had already started whispering. Not publicly. Not scandalously. Just the quiet, elegant kind of whisper that travels through law offices, country clubs, church benches, and charity boards. The kind built from phrases like, Did you hear about Evelyn Carter? Silver Pines flagged the paperwork. Martin Keller is involved. By 8:30 a.m., Jennifer had called me 11 times. I know because I counted. Not out of anxiety. Out of education. Each missed call taught me something. Call number 1, panic. Call number 4, strategy. Call number 7, damage control. Call number 11, fear. Daniel texted instead. Mom, please don't do anything drastic. We can explain. Explain. Such a fascinating word when people are caught. Not confess. Not apologize. Explain. I didn't respond. Instead, I met Martin at his downtown office beneath the same brass clock Walter used to joke was 5 minutes slow, just like every lawyer. For 3 hours, we reviewed everything. Unauthorized trust withdrawals. False competency claims. Forged behavioral documentation. Intent to transfer property under manipulated care planning. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was exposure. Evelyn, Martin said carefully, sliding a fresh set of documents toward me. You have several options. Civil recovery. Fraud investigation. Protective family injunction. I stared at the papers. So many years raising Daniel to be kind, reduced to legal terminology. Which option protects me best? I asked. Martin didn't hesitate. Immediate restructuring. So that's what we did. By noon, Daniel was formally removed from all trust oversight. Jennifer was named in a cease-contact financial directive. My estate was transferred into an irrevocable protective structure supervised solely by Martin's firm. And Chloe. I paused there. Because unlike her parents, Chloe was still young enough to have been shaped, not finished. Can her inheritance be delayed? I asked. Martin nodded. With behavioral ethics provisions. Behavioral ethics provisions. Walter would have loved that. So I added one condition, no direct inheritance access until age 30, and only after completing financial literacy, volunteer service, and independent psychological review. Not punishment. Correction. If contempt had been taught, then maybe character could be taught too. That afternoon, Chloe showed up at my front door alone. No designer attitude. No audience. No Jennifer. Just a 19-year-old girl standing on my porch in an oversized sweatshirt, mascara streaked, looking suddenly much younger than the girl who had slapped me. When I opened the door, she didn't speak right away. She just stared at me. At my face. At the faint yellowing bruise near my cheekbone. And then, she started crying. Not dramatic crying. Not manipulative. Confused crying. The kind that comes when someone's version of reality cracks too fast. "Mom said you were trying to take everything from us," she whispered. I said nothing. "Dad said Grandpa wanted things this way." Still, nothing. Then her voice broke. "But Silver Pines called me this morning." That got my attention. Apparently, after intake was frozen, compliance officers had contacted all listed facilitators, including Chloe. She had received copies. My medical evaluation. Jennifer's statements. The forged competency language. My granddaughter had read, in black and white, how her own mother described me, increasingly confused. Financially irresponsible. Emotionally unstable. Chloe covered her mouth. "I thought," she whispered. "I thought we were helping." And there it was. Not innocence. But influence. Walter had been right. Children do not invent contempt. They inherit it. I stepped aside from the doorway. "Come in," I said. Because this was the difference between me and Jennifer. I still understood that breaking a cycle sometimes looks different than winning. That afternoon, for the first time in years, Chloe sat at my kitchen table. No phone. No performance. Just silence, coffee, and truth. And finally, she asked the question no one else had been brave enough to ask. "Grandma, what really happened to our family?" I didn't answer Chloe right away. Not because I didn't know. Because some truths, especially family truths, should be handed over carefully. Like heirlooms. Or loaded weapons. The kettle hummed softly on the stove while rain tapped against the kitchen windows, gentle and steady, the kind Walter used to call thinking weather. I placed 2 mugs on the table. Chamomile for me. Hot chocolate for Chloe. Because no matter how old she looked in that moment, mascara smudged, ashamed, quieter than I'd ever seen her, part of me still remembered the little girl who used to insist marshmallows counted as dinner. "Our family," I said finally, stirring slowly, "didn't break all at once." Chloe's red-rimmed eyes lifted to mine. "It broke in inches." She said nothing. So I told her. Not cruelly. Not theatrically. Just truth. I told her how Walter had started noticing Jennifer's questions when his cancer got worse. How concern slowly became calculation. How helping became paperwork. How Daniel, my sweet boy, my once kind boy, began confusing convenience with loyalty. I showed her the trust statements. The Silver Pines intake forms. Jennifer's competency lies. Daniel's withdrawals. And then, I showed her Walter's letter. Children do not invent contempt. They inherit it. Chloe read that line 3 times. By the second, her breathing changed. By the third, she cried harder than before. "I didn't know," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed her. Not completely. But enough. "Of course you didn't," I said gently. "Because manipulation works best when it sounds like love." She folded then. Not physically. Spiritually. The kind of collapse that happens when someone realizes they've been participating in harm they never fully understood. "I thought you hated Mom," she said. I almost smiled. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I think your mother started treating love like ownership, and no one stopped her. Including me. That was my part. My silence. My politeness. My generation was taught that keeping peace was noble. But sometimes, keeping peace just protects the person causing damage." For 3 hours, Chloe sat there asking questions. Real ones. Did Grandpa know? Did Dad steal on purpose? Was Mom always like this? Do you hate me? That last one nearly broke me. Because despite everything, despite the slap, the words, the public humiliation, I saw it now. She wasn't born cruel. She had been coached, rewarded, shaped in rooms where I wasn't present. So I reached across the table and took her hand. The same hand that had struck me. I hate what was planted in you, I said quietly. But that is not the same as hating you. She sobbed then. The deep kind. Not pretty. Not controlled. Necessary. By evening, Chloe had done something no one else in my family had managed yet. She told the truth without protecting herself. She said, "If you moved out," Chloe whispered, "Mom said the house could finally become the family asset it was supposed to be." There it was. Not memory decline. Not concern. Not care. Real estate. My home had not become inconvenient. It had become valuable. And suddenly, every holiday exclusion, every subtle insult, every forgotten invitation, every conversation held just out of earshot, clicked. Puzzle pieces. Years of them. Jennifer hadn't been pushing me away emotionally. She'd been repositioning me financially. That night, after Chloe left, with swollen eyes, Walter's letter photocopied in her purse, and more truth than she arrived with, I sat alone in the living room. Walter's armchair beside me. His reading glasses still in the drawer. His framed photo on the mantel. "I see it now," I whispered. And somehow, in the silence that followed, I think he knew I finally did. The next morning, I made one final appointment. Sunday dinner. My house. Entire family. No excuses. Daniel came. Jennifer came. Even Chloe. They thought it was reconciliation. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe surrender. But as I set Walter's china one last time, I realized something extraordinary. For the first time in 70 years, I wasn't preparing a family meal. I was preparing a reckoning. Sunday dinner began at 5 p.m. Right on time. Because Walter had always believed that people revealed themselves most clearly when they were expected and watched. By 4:30, the roast was resting beneath foil. The mashed potatoes were in my mother's porcelain bowl. Candles flickered softly across the same mahogany table where, 1 week earlier, my granddaughter had slapped me in front of everyone I loved. Only this time, nothing about me was unprepared. I wore emerald green, Walter's favorite. My pearls. My posture. And for the first time in years, I did not set extra places out of hope. I set them with purpose. Daniel arrived first, carrying wine. Jennifer followed, holding a store-bought pie she had likely purchased to look thoughtful. Chloe came last. Quiet. No designer swagger. No phone in her hand. Just clear eyes, and consequences. No one mentioned my birthday. No one mentioned silver pines. No one mentioned the bruised truth hanging over this table like a chandelier no one dared acknowledge. We ate in fragile politeness. Forks. Glasses. Napkins. The performance of family. And then, just as dessert plates were cleared, I stood. "I have something your father wanted you to hear," I said, looking directly at Daniel. His fork froze. Jennifer's shoulders tightened. Chloe looked down. I reached for the envelope beside Walter's framed photograph and unfolded his letter with steady hands. Then I read it aloud. Not all of it. Just enough. "If Daniel pressures you to move, sell, or surrender this home, he is no longer protecting you. He is protecting what he wants from you." Daniel went pale. Actually pale. The kind of pale that no excuse can fix. "Mom!" I raised one hand. For 70 years that hand had soothed fevers, packed lunches, wiped tears. That night, it silenced. "No," I said. And the room obeyed. I placed copies of the trust withdrawals beside his plate. Bahamas cruise. Lexus lease. Kitchen renovation. Silver pines. Jennifer's breathing changed first. Sharp. Cornered. "This is insane," she snapped. "You're humiliating us." I looked at her then with more calm than anger. "No, Jennifer," I said. "Humiliation was my birthday." Silence. Heavy. Earned. Then Chloe did something her mother never expected. She pushed back her chair. "I knew about the party," she said, voice shaking. "But I didn't know about this." Jennifer turned fast. "Chloe, no," Chloe said. "My word. At my table. In my house." Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they weren't manipulative. "They lied to you, Grandma. And they used me." Daniel covered his face. Not because he was innocent. Because exposure is heavier than guilt. I slid one final document onto the table. Irrevocable trust restructuring. Effective immediately. Daniel removed. Jennifer permanently barred from oversight. Chloe's inheritance suspended pending ethical provisions. And then, the final page. My home, upon my death, would not be sold to descendants. It would become the Walter and Evelyn Carter House for Transitional Women, a residence supporting widows displaced by financial abuse. Jennifer actually gasped. "You're giving away our inheritance?" "Our." Such a revealing word. I smiled. "No," I said softly. "I'm giving away what you already treated like it was yours." For once, no one had a response. Because greed collapses when ownership was never real. Daniel cried. Quietly. Not for me. For himself. For the man he realized he had become. And Chloe. My sweet, damaged, learning Chloe. She walked around the table, stopped beside me, and whispered the words I had thought I might never hear. "I'm so sorry, Grandma." This time, when she touched my face. It was gentle. And because Walter had loved redemption almost as much as justice. I kissed her forehead. Not because all was forgiven. But because cycles only break when someone chooses differently. By 8:12 p.m., they were gone. The house was quiet again. But not empty. Never empty. I stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall over Walter's rose garden. Soft. Clean. Certain. Then I looked at his chair. At the life we built. At the home I kept. And I finally understood something that took me 70 years to learn. Family is not the people who feel entitled to your sacrifice. Family is the people who protect your dignity. 1 week earlier, my granddaughter told me I should have died years ago. She was wrong. Because that night, the only thing that died was the version of me they thought they could use.